I'm your host, Tomás Garza, and today we have something very hard-hitting for you today. Oh yes, yeah, A Course in Miracles delivers with absolute truth today, and it delivers with lessons that, well, we frankly get to hear and hopefully want to hear in the world, and we need to hear. And today is in the inspiring and very uplifting, but also very frank, need to hear type category. And we all need this today. So wherever you're joining me from, welcome. We are on lesson 65 of the workbook for students. So I know I've had a number of people join in this live stream in the last few days. So welcome. If you are familiar with the Course in Miracles, we're going through on this live the workbook for students, and we're on lesson 65 today. So if you're familiar with this component of the course, wherever you are, if you're going through it or if you're not, these are really wonderful, handy and helpful reviews for all of us. Now, if you're not familiar with the Course in Miracles, what this is all about is this is a thought system. It is a self-study curriculum. So contrary to what may be floating around out there in terms of misinformation and misconceptions, this is not a religion in and of itself. It is a self-study curriculum that literally means just that, self-study, meaning you go at your own pace, which does not have to be the pace of this live stream, which takes place every day. So you don't have to do that. You may encourage you to do that. Do just that. If you have found something that speaks to you and resonates with you, then please continue to do that. One of the beauties of A Course in Miracles is it presents universal spiritual principles, things that apply no matter who you are, where you are, or what your spiritual practice or walk or journey looks like. It applies no matter what. Why? Because it presents absolute truth. And it helps us to train our minds, to attenuate our minds to love, with fear being the opposite of love. And it can enhance, and definitely does enhance, any spiritual practice that you might be engaged in. It gives you a different perspective sometimes, a different eye and a different lens to interpret and see things differently, and ideally to show up in the world differently, to lead differently, to teach differently, and to show up as more loving, as more joyful, happier, more forgiving, more patient. Characteristics that we all desire, that we all want. This is one way that we can experience this in our lives. And it doesn't matter that you believe anything that we're talking about, though if you do, fantastic, right? That's great, but it's not required. All the workbook does as a component of A Course in Miracles is ask us to practice. And every day there is an idea. It's called a lesson. So if you prefer to think of it as an idea, if you think going to school is something that is completely aberrant to you, then that's absolutely fine. They're ideas. They're statements about universal spirituality that apply to everyone, each and every one of us, and we practice them. So this is where we are. If you're just joining us, again, I welcome you. This can be something that will really benefit you and your walk. So if you are enjoying these live streams, feel welcome to share them out with your people, with your Facebook friends, with your community, because A Course in Miracles is, in fact, all about community. This lends itself, this particular self-study curriculum, even though it's self-study, and yeah, I can only do my own practice, you can only do your practice individually, It lends itself to community. You'll notice, if you're not participating in one of these groups already, you'll notice that there are a number of study groups online as well as in person, especially online these days. There are a lot of resources and a lot of community because there are a lot of people working through these lessons in their lives, and it's very fun. I've been a member of one of these groups before, a study group that would meet every week, and we'd go over portions of this together. Really quite a lot of fun and very interesting to learn from each other. And the theory behind this, it's totally deliberate on the part of the course because minds are joined. Ultimately, we are, in fact, one, and minds are joined. So why not learn in a community environment? So that may work much better for some of you. So check those out online for sure. Lesson 65 is, as far as these lessons go, kind of a spiritual hard hitter, so to speak. I just use that as language to get people's attention. And that's what Jesus is trying to do here. That's what the Holy Spirit's trying to do here. Get our attention. Lesson 65, my only function is the one God gave me. My only function. Now, lesson 64, lesson 63 tell us that forgiveness is our function. As the light of the world, and we are the light of the world, forgiveness is our function. My only function is the one God gave me. So, a couple different layers here. Number one is a statement that forgiveness, the function God gave us, is in fact our only function. It's what we're here to do. Also, by saying it's our only function, we're committing to it. And that does imply committing to it above all other perceived functions. Now, we've given ourselves a lot to do in the world, haven't we? This is something that's valuable because we don't always think about it in these terms, but we've given ourselves lots of functions, labels, you could call them, in the world. You might be a marketing guru in your work, right? You might be a technological genius. You might be a computer programmer. These are all functions that we've given ourselves in the world. Parent, lover, right? Spouse, romantic partner, friend, homeowner. The list goes on. It goes on and on and on. We've given ourselves a lot of functions in the world. Fantastic email checker, right? Copywriter. I mean, you name it. It goes on and on and on and on. None of these functions ultimately matters. Our only real function is the one God gave us, which is forgiveness. Now, this does not mean that you shouldn't go about your life as you've currently designed it. We're not saying that you have to give up relationships. We're not saying that you should give up careers. No, none of that. Because here in the world, we need things like money, we need relationships, and there are opportunities for us to forgive. We can choose to see the world this way, as a giant living laboratory for our own awakening. Everything that annoys us, that rubs us the wrong way, that angers us, makes us a little bit angry, frustrated, sad. These are all opportunities for us to extend forgiveness as our only function. And again, as we've talked about the last few days here, forgiveness means something different in A Course in Miracles than it does in common parlance. Often when someone forgives somebody in the world, they do it with strings attached, or the one that does the forgiving feels superior. Why? A belief in sin, punishment, and transgression. Someone has offended somebody. This is the way the world sees it, and that deserves punishment. So someone's being extremely generous by extending forgiveness. And often, all too often, you probably know people that have done this to you. The person doing the forgiving holds it against the forgiven. They feel superior because they have not committed this offense, whatever it is. And the person that is forgiven may end up feeling really guilty, despite the fact that someone has said that they forgive them. It's woefully incomplete. And if it's done that way, as it all too often is in the world, it's not a loving act. The Course in Miracles sees it differently. There is no such thing as sin. Whether you believe that or not, that's all right. Let's just roll with the idea. That's all the workbook is asking us to do, is just roll with it. Take the idea for what it is and practice it. Doesn't matter if you believe it or not. There is no sin. God has no ego to be offended. So in the world, when someone says something or does something, they are either extending love or they are issuing a call for love. Very, very different point of view, different interpretation. They're either extending love or calling for love. So when someone calls for love, the appropriate thing to do is give love. That's forgiveness as it's seen and presented and ideally practiced in A Course in Miracles. It's our function. So how do you feel when you genuinely forgive? I know how I've felt when I've genuinely forgiven. And I also know the road that it took for me to be able to do that, which was long. It was. It was long with a lot of twists and turns and false starts. And well, spiritual practice is like that. Nobody ever said that it's just going to be an instant blinding flash of light. And then boom, you'll always be joyful. I mean, we're all headed there, but most of us have a long road ahead of us, and we're walking it right now. You're walking it right now, or you would not be watching this live stream. You're walking it right now, or you would not have been interested in Enlightened World Network, period. So what we're to do is prioritize our function, forgiveness, over all else, because the others don't matter. We have so many different things that we pay attention to in the world. Will they bring us long lasting, and I don't mean just this lifetime, but constant, everlasting happiness, joy, limitlessness that has no opposition and that extends on because it's outside of time? Will all of our randomly assigned functions give us that? No, no, they won't, right? If you think about it, they won't. Why? Because a career ends, and it's not always rainbows and unicorns, right? It's not always joyous. If you have a job as a tech professional or something, things don't always work, right? And if you work with human beings, well, human beings don't always work either, right? They say things. We act out of fear, identifying ourselves with the ego, with a separate sense of self. So things can get messy. Things can get messy. What all this really means is that we're diverting our attention in the world from what really matters. So, what Workbook Lesson 65 talks about is returning to what really matters. How do we do this? Many ways. One of these is meditation practice. Another is working with these lessons as they're described here in the workbook. And this pretty much is a meditation practice. So, what happens in a basic meditation practice, if you're familiar with it, then you'll know, is that we experience all of these distracting thoughts in what seems like a torrent, doesn't it? It seems like a steady stream that goes on and on. One minute we're thinking about the quality of our computer screen. The next minute we're thinking about how our big toe itches. Then we're thinking about tomorrow. Then what happened in 1990 in August, that time that someone cut us off on the freeway. We just remember these weird things, seemingly random events from the past. We dwell on the future. We're doing anything but sitting still and present right here in the moment. meditation practice, yoga practice, a nice walk, self-care, spiritual practice, prayer, practicing these lessons in the workbook for students all bring us back to the present moment. And it's critical because this is all we have. This right now is when we make a decision. It's where we make a decision for love. It's when we choose our function over all the other ones. It's where we choose happiness instead of unhappiness. It's where we choose God instead of the ego. Okay. It's where you choose your guides instead of cable news, for example. Every workbook lesson has a specified and suggested way to work with the day's idea. However, if you do nothing else, then it is so valuable today, especially because this is one of those lessons that just lays it out on the line for us, to repeat today's idea. My only function is the one God gave me. I want no other, and I have no other. So whether you repeat this, it's very powerful. The idea is my only function is the one God gave me. You can add to this, I want no other, and I have no other. You're prioritizing forgiveness. What are the benefits of forgiveness? Awakening, full, complete awakening, joy, love, loving relationship, power, standing in real power and real authority, recognizing who you are and have always been, no matter how many other paths you've chosen. Very powerful. We're talking loving, very powerful stuff here. Very. My only function is the one God gave me. I want no other, and I have no other. So repeat this. You can do it with your eyes closed, or you can do it with your eyes open, looking around you at everything you see. And it's this continued practice that enables us to truly forgive, that enables us to see things, the world, ourselves, other people, all situations in a completely different light, in the light of love and of truth. So this is my hope for all of us, is that we take the opportunity right now, in the present moment, to make this choice. We take the opportunity. And so let me hop on here, and I'm going to see who's joining me live, because I always love to do this. All right. Well, Rachel, hello. And Cindy, hey, how are you? All right. Thank you guys for tuning in here. So let's read this comment here. This is from Cindy, who's been my guest on the show. Why has she been the guest? Well, she's right across the hall from me. She's my wife, and she's a course student. So let's see what she has to say here. And good morning to you. All right. So forgiveness isn't a natural function of our human minds. Okay. I'm actually on lesson 134, and I felt extremely challenged to practice the lesson around forgiveness this time, because the person that I'm assuming that you're working with here has made choices that I would never make. Yeah. I'm asked to forgive it and ask myself if I would condemn myself for the same action. I feel I would never do what she did, so it's hard to let go. Okay, this is so juicy, isn't it? Thank you for the comment. Yeah, let's talk about forgiveness in a more concrete sense when we're working with somebody that has made a choice that we find aberrant, that we find unhelpful, wrong, hurtful, whatever it is, right? I actually don't know who you're talking about here. So this is really, really a great question. Thank you. What we do in forgiving is we recognize that this person is issuing a call for love, which is not automatically the easiest thing to do in the moment. Some of these behaviors can be really poor behaviors. I mean, there's no other way to put it than that sometimes. People act out for all kinds of reasons, and it's a call for love. So what we're doing in forgiving is, this is very important, is that we're overlooking the error that they made. And the only error really is identifying with the ego. So in extending love, we're overlooking that. It also means we can keep our healthy boundaries. This is something that people often mistake in terms of forgiveness, which I will talk about in greater detail. In fact, I'm developing workshops, including a mastermind around forgiveness as it's presented and practiced in A Course in Miracles. So definitely stay tuned for these details. I will announce them. I'm in the process of that. And what's going on with all of this is that we have an obligation to show up, teach and lead, and be as healthy and as loving and as whole as we possibly can. So that means that forgiveness does not have to mean that we condone the other person's behavior, which we may never do. You don't have to do that. None of us has to do that. We can keep our healthy boundaries. And in fact, it's sane, it's loving, and it's very helpful to know that we would never do that. And in forgiving them, we're not saying that their behavior is okay, because it may not be in the world. But we don't have to allow it to drag us down. Now, the person that's being forgiven does not even have to know that you forgive them. It's not like we have to call somebody up on the phone or get on a Zoom with them and say, hey, I forgive you. I'm really offended and this makes me angry. I would never do this. But they don't even have to know that you're doing it. So how does this change it for you? Well, it makes you feel relieved. When I've forgiven people that have wronged me, I felt instantly relieved, and they didn't even know I was doing it. So they don't have to. Yeah, it's not like we have to do that. And if you find that someone has behaved so badly or abused you that you're unable to forgive in the moment, that's okay. We start where we are. Start where you are. And please don't forget yourself in this equation. Critically important that we forgive ourselves. So many of us find that very hard. We would rather forgive anyone but ourselves. And I say, okay, what's up with that? Yeah. We cannot leave ourselves out of this. Total forgiveness means total forgiveness. And hello and good morning, everybody that's tuning in here. And yeah, forgiveness can be challenging to start out. The ego hates it, doesn't it? I mean, we're so conditioned and habituated to see ourselves as cut off and striving against people, competing against people for what we presume to be limited resources. And we kind of fight like dogs sometimes when you think about it. Why? Right? Well, we're identifying with the ego. We see ourselves as separate. Therefore, other people seem to be a threat to us. Well, they're not, ultimately. And all we're asked to do is to accept this function. And when we do accept this function, it actually becomes easier. And again, if there are people in your life that you're currently unable to extend forgiveness to, that's okay. That's okay. This is a process. Like I mentioned at the outset, this is not necessarily a blinding flash of light. While that is certainly possible and instantaneous, yeah, it's possible. But most of us don't have that experience, especially right away, where we have to train ourselves and attenuate ourselves to a different way of looking at the world. And this is a different way of looking at the world. So thank you so much, everyone. And Rachel, hello. Thank you. All right. Hi, Rachel. Let me address this. Thank you for joining me. I'm happy you're loving this. This live stream is daily and it bounces around every day. It's at different times. So what I recommend that everyone do is check the show guide on Enlightened World Network's Facebook page. So every day that will be posted and pinned as the first post on the thread that shows the daily guide in Eastern Daylight Time in North America. I can tell you that tomorrow it will be the same time, so 12 o'clock noon Eastern tomorrow. And check that show guide every day. And if you are able to catch it live, fantastic, because I love to interact with all of you live. And if it's the replay, that's fine. Feel welcome to leave comments if you're catching this on the replay. And thank you so much. I'm glad that you're able to tune in and that you're enjoying this. I'm really enjoying sharing this with all of you. And it is really a great honor for me to be able to do that. And it's a lot of fun too. Because who said spirituality had to be totally serious, right? I mean, laughter's great medicine, some of the best. Okay, guys, thank you all for tuning in. This has been A Course in Miracles 365, Awakening to Love, and I'm Tomás Garza. And again, thank you for joining me. I'll see you all again tomorrow.